Coming up on The World Today. WHO says no reason to stop using the AstraZeneca vaccine over fears it causes blood clots. U.S. President Joe Biden eyes 4th of July as Independence Day from the coronavirus. Plus, Turkey says the first diplomatic contact held with Egypt since 2013. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Akaite Afia. The World Health Organization says countries should not stop using AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine over fears it causes blood clots, as there is no indication that this is true. Bulgaria, Denmark, and Norway are among the countries that have paused its use. But the WHO says there's no link between the jab and an increased risk of developing a clot. Here's more on this and other developments on our COVID-19 Global Update.
Around 5 million people in Europe have already received the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. There's been about 30 cases in Europe of developing blood clots after the vaccine was administered. Several countries, including Bulgaria, Thailand, Norway, and Denmark, have suspended the use of the vaccine. AstraZeneca has said the drug's safety has been studied extensively in clinical trials. And while the World Health Organization says its advisory committee is investigating the AstraZeneca vaccine issues, the UN agency insists there is no reason not to use it.
It's very important to understand that, yes, we should continue using the AstraZeneca vaccine. All that we're looking at is what we always look at. Any safety signal must be investigated. In fact, it's very important that we're hearing safety signals, because if we were not hearing about any safety signals, then that would suggest that there is not enough review and vigilance. We must always ensure we look for any safety signals when we roll out vaccines, and we must review them. But there is no indication that to not use it.
In other developments, Nagpur in western India is to be the first major city in the country to return to a complete lockdown amid a sharp spike in coronavirus cases. The week-long lockdown, which starts on March the 15th, will extend to adjoining areas of the district as well. India has recorded more than 11 million cases and 157,000 deaths so far. Italy has recorded a daily increase of more than 25,000 COVID-19 cases for the first time since November the 29th last year. Meanwhile, officials in northern Italy have confirmed that the situation has worsened and the regions will soon be declared red zones, which means the highest level of coronavirus response. Elsewhere in Europe, Germany's health minister says Germans have to brace for a few hard weeks with the onset of a third wave. Experts say vaccination would help bring the virus under control, but in the meantime, people should socially distance. And finally, some positive news. All remaining restrictions in New Zealand's largest city, Auckland, have been lifted after no locally transmitted cases of coronavirus were reported for 2 weeks.
This follows 6 days of Auckland being at alert level 2, with 7 days prior to that at alert level 3. The increase in alert levels was, of course, due to the Auckland February cluster, 15 positive community cases outside managed isolation facilities. All of those 15 cases are either in a quarantine facility or have recovered. The Director General of Health has advised Cabinet he considers the outbreak to be contained.
Swift public health measures combined with aggressive contact tracing, border closures and compulsory isolation for travellers have been credited with making New Zealand highly successful in keeping the pandemic from spreading.
And for that we all say.
Over in the United States, President Joe Biden is hopeful that America can mark independence from COVID-19 on July 4th if people get vaccinated. In his first primetime address as president, Mr. Biden said he would order states to make all adults eligible for vaccinations by May 1st. Current measures prioritize people by age or health condition. Mr. Biden was speaking exactly a year to the day after the outbreak was classified a global pandemic. 500,000 Americans have since died, more than the death toll from the World War I, World War II, and the Vietnam War combined. Schools have been closed, businesses shuttered, and people kept apart.
A year ago, we were hit with a virus that was met with silence and spread unchecked. Denials for days, weeks, then months, that led to more deaths, more infections, more stress, and more loneliness. Photos and videos from 2019 feel like they were taken in another era. The last vacation, the last birthday with friends, the last holiday with extended family. This country will be vaccinated soon. Our economy will be on the mend. Our kids will be back in school. And we'll have proven once again that this country can do anything. Hard things, big things, important things.
Australia Prime Minister Scott Morrison says the first meeting of the leaders of Quad countries would discuss security challenges across the Indo-Pacific, climate change, and efforts to contain the spread of COVID-19 in the region. U.S. President Joe Biden and the Prime Ministers of Australia, India, and Japan will hold an online meeting on Saturday early morning Australian time in what Prime Minister Morrison believes will be a historical moment. India, the United States, Japan, and Australia are members of the Quad, an informal group that Washington has been promoting to work as a potential bulwark against China's increasing political, commercial, and military activity in the Indo-Pacific.
This is a historic meeting of 4 leaders from these nations which are such close friends. And I'm looking forward to the discussions that we'll be having over a range of topics, in particular how we're dealing in the region with COVID-19, the challenges that we have of security and the maritime domain here across the Indo-Pacific, and also, of course, how we're working together to achieve net zero into the future on emissions and move to a new energy economy right across the Indo-Pacific region and indeed around the world. And I'm sure there'll be many other issues that we address and the technology partnerships that will be necessary to achieve those goals.
Over in Myanmar, a group of lawyers for journalists who were arrested for reporting on Myanmar's junta's crackdown on anti-coup protesters a couple of weeks ago have been barred from entering a Yangon court hearing. Dien Zaw, 32, a Burmese journalist for AP, was among 6 journalists who were detained during the protest and charged with violating a public order law, according to their lawyers. Myanmar has been in crisis since the army ousted Suu Kyi's elected government in February. In the coup that detained her and officials of her National League for Democracy party and set up a ruling junta of generals. The army has justified taking power by saying that a November election, overwhelmingly won by Suu Kyi's party, was marred by fraud and assertion rejected by the Electoral Commission. In the meantime, activists held more rallies today against the junta as South Korea said it would suspend defense exchanges and reconsider development aid to the Southeast Asian nation because of the military's harsh crackdown on protests. A group of frontline protesters with protective gear and homemade shields at a main road in Yangon observed a minute of silence before they banged on shields and sang in a demonstration. Friday's rallies came a day after a rights group said security forces killed 12 protesters, and as the lawyer of deposed leader Aung San Suu Kyi ridiculed new bribery allegations against her. The Assistance Association for Political Prisoners, or AAPP, advocacy group says more than 70 protesters have been killed since the coup on February 1st. Police in in Britain have revealed that a body found in a woods outside London was that of Sarah Everard, whose disappearance last week has sparked anger and fears among women about their safety. The 33-year-old disappeared while walking home from a friend's house in South London last Wednesday, and police have arrested a serving officer on suspicion of her kidnapping and murder. The case has led to an outpouring of personal accounts by women of their own experiences and fears of walking streets alone at night, and a campaign for action to address this.
I can now confirm that it is the body of Sarah Everard. Clearly, Sarah's family have been updated with this most distressing news. And I just want to pause for a moment and say that my thoughts and prayers and those of the entire organisation remain with her and with them at this awful time. Specialist officers remain in constant contact with Sarah's family and will continue to support them throughout the investigation and beyond. That investigation continues at a pace, and we have hundreds of officers working round the clock to establish the full circumstances of Sarah's disappearance and her murder. And the man remains in custody at a London police station on suspicion of committing those crimes. I also recognise the wider concerns that are being raised quite rightly about the safety of women in public spaces in London and also elsewhere in the country. I want to say now that this organisation and the men and women in it remain committed to protecting Londoners wherever they are in this city.
Britain's Prince Philip is prepared to spend his fourth weekend in the hospital as the monarchy grapples with its greatest crisis this century, following an explosive interview with Prince Harry and his wife Meghan. Having first been admitted to King Edward Hospital as a precaution on February 16th, the Duke of Edinburgh subsequently received treatment for an infection before moving to a specialist cardiac center for a procedure to treat a pre-existing condition. Since being admitted to the hospital, the Duke has been publicly visited only by his son and the heir to the crown, Prince Charles. Charles' second son, Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, took part in a 2-hour interview broadcast on Sunday in which he and his wife Meghan accused the royal family of racism and of failing to protect them from negative media coverage. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey has resumed diplomatic contacts with Egypt and wants to further cooperation after years of tension since the Egyptian army toppled a Muslim Brotherhood president close to Ankara. President Tayyip Erdogan says the contacts were not at the highest level, but right below the highest level, and hopes that both countries can continue the process. Relations with Cairo have been frosty since Egypt's army ousted Mohamed Morsi, Egypt's first democratically elected president, and an ally of Erdogan after protests in 2013. Rebuilding trust will be hard, as well as the tensions over the ousting of Morsi and Mediterranean disputes. Egypt's foreign minister, Sameh Shoukry, said last week the Arab League expressed its, quote, categorical rejection of Turkish military interventions in Syria, Iraq, and Libya. Western countries have called on Egypt to end the prosecution of activists, journalists, and perceived political opponents under counterterrorism laws and to unconditionally release them. The United States, which has observer status at the UN Human Rights Council, was among 31 signatories of the joint statement on Egypt, the first since 2014, which called on the government to lift curbs on freedom of expression and assembly. Egypt is a close ally of the United States, but the Biden administration has vowed to speak out about human rights violations and abuses of rule of law worldwide.
We urge Egypt to guarantee space for civil society to work without fear of intimidation, harassment, arrest, detention, or any form of reprisal, lifting travel bans and asset freezes, including IRP staff. We call on Egypt to lift restrictions on media and digital freedom, to end blocking independent media and release journalists. We are deeply concerned about the application of terrorism laws against human rights defenders, LGBTI persons, journalists, politicians and lawyers. We urge Egypt to end using terrorism charges to hold activists in extended pre-trial detention with additional charges. We express concern at abuses of due process, including limitations on lawyers. We call for accountability and end of impunity. We remain deeply concerned about the trajectory of human rights in Egypt and share the High Commissioner's and Special Procedures concerns. We observe restrictions on freedom of expression and right to peaceful assembly, constrained space for civil society and political opposition, and application of terrorism legislation against peaceful critics.
A mass funeral ceremony has been held for victims of a series of explosions in Equatorial Guinea's largest city, which killed at least 105 people and injured more than 600 others. The victims' coffins were carried in procession into a soccer stadium in Bata, where the blast happened on Sunday. Prime Minister Francisco Asue and Vice President Teodoro Nguema Obiang watched the procession. The government blamed the explosions on fires set by farmers living near a military base and the neglect handling of dynamite stocks by the military unit guarding them. King Godswill Zwelithini of Zulu Nation in South Africa has died in the hospital where he was being treated for diabetes-related issues. The royal family said in a statement that King Zwelithini died on Friday at the age of 72. The king was the leader of South Africa's largest ethnic group and an influential traditional ruler. He was admitted to the hospital in KwaZulu-Natal last week to monitor his ongoing diabetes condition. The King's Prime Minister thanks South Africa for its, quote, continued prayers and support in this most difficult time.
Okay, eyes this way, please, Your Honour. Just go all right, guys. All right.
Meanwhile, following news of his death, South Africans have been paying tribute to Zulu King Goodwill Zwelithini. Residents of Johannesburg reacted with shock to the king's passing.
It's a great loss, to us as South African community, in particular the Amazulu Nation, and then to his family as well. It's a great loss, given the fact that historical magnitude of Amazulu, him leading Amazulu through difficult times during apartheid, seeing Amazulu Nation triumph to democratic dispensation.
I'm feeling very bad because it's my king. Yeah, I'm a Zulu person. I'm born from KwaZulu-Natal.
We've lost our pillar, we've lost our leader, we've lost someone who was so culturally aware, someone who was bringing all the pieces together. I feel like it's not just the loss for the Zulu Nation, but the loss of culture in itself and the people in South Africa, because that's what we're all about.
And finally on the program, with the scattering of tiny shredded plastic bits across refurbished canvas, Filipino artist Gilbert Angeles is transforming waste, especially non-recyclable trash, into paintings worth up to a few $1,000s. Since 2019, the 49-year-old artist has made over 24 of these paintings, all of them made from a mix of shredded plastics, expired paints, and leftover wood from demolished homes. These materials were sourced from around his neighborhood or donated by contacts he has built since starting his campaign. Angeles says he started his advocacy after reading a news article about the Philippines being among the top contributors of plastic waste, hoping that his talents can somehow influence people to rethink how they get rid of or generate trash.
I love the fact that it gives us hope. This particular painting is called Living Hope, and that I find it really does give living hope. It's got beautiful colours, recycled plastic, repurposing bad things and making them beautiful things, or not necessarily bad things, but you know, things that damage our environment.
All right, well, that is all we have for the program today. Thanks so much for staying with us. I'm Ekaite Afia. Have a great weekend and stay safe.